Welcome, folks. Rambam coming near the end. We're in the laws of mourning, and the various laws have to do with mourning of a loved one. So, whenever a person rends his garment after the loss of a relative other than a parent, he may sew the tear after 7 days of mourning and mend it after 30 days. So, sewing is like you would still see the stitches, just like not a mending means like to almost make it look as new again. So for anybody that's not a parent, that you are, you know, a brother, sister, a spouse, a child, right? Um, that you need to rend, meaning to tear your garment, right? So back in the day, today people have clothes and they don't need to sew back. But back in the day, and that might have been their own only weekday clothing. Might have been their only weekday clothing. You can let, yes, thank you. So then you could mend it after 30 days. For one's father and mother, you may sew the tear after 30 days, but never mend it. Otherwise, there's always going to be a sign, that of in honor of your parents. A woman should rend her garments and sew them immediately, even after she lost a father or mother. It's an expression of modesty, right? Again, that's because that's what her clothes were. And not and she didn't have a second pair of clothes. Today, I don't think you'd have to do that. Um, because you do have other clothing. But this way she would be more modest as a result. Okay, just the halacha two, just as a person must rend his garments for the loss of his father and mother, so too he's obligated to rend his garments for the loss of a teacher who instructed him the Torah, a nasi, right, the head of the Jewish people, Av Beis Din, the head of the Jewish court, the majority of the community who were slain, the cursing of God's name. Someone cursed God's name, right? And you heard it. Actually, I don't know if it means you heard it or if it was in your town. I'm not sure. The burning of a Torah scroll when seeing the cities of Yehuda, Yerushalayim, and the temple and their destruction. Halacha 3. All of these, excuse me, all of these tears should be rent to the extent that one reveals his heart, right? So you're taking your clothing and you're revealing your heart and should never be mended. Although they should never be mended, they may be sewn irregularly. Sewn after the sides are wound or twisted together or sewn like ladders. All that was forbidden was the Alexandrian mending, which on the surface you wouldn't notice the tear then, right? And made it, mended in such a way they didn't notice that it was torn. Whenever a person tears a garment in a place where it was sewn irregularly or sewn after the sides were wound and twisted together, his act is of no consequence. If, however, he rips the garment where it has been mended in the Alexandrian manner, it is of consequence. So if it, again, remember, this is the only clothing they have. So the person lost, a brother and he sewed it back together. It wasn't yet mended for whatever reason, right? Then he lost another brother. If he tears it in the same place where and it wasn't mended, only sewn, then that's not called rendering. That's not called tearing your garment, right? But if it was mended, that is called. Even if one turns his garment upside down and makes his collar its hem, he should not mend it. So you took your rent garment, you turn it upside down, right? Now the collar becomes the hem. So you might say, oh, okay, now you could still shouldn't mend it. Halacha, just as the seller may not mend it, so to the purchaser may not. Therefore, the seller must notify the purchaser that this tear may not be mended. So the seller, it's his own garment, right? And whatever, he wants to sell it now. I guess he got a new one. He doesn't need it. And back in the day, everything had a value. Excuse me. Hey, what is the source that teaches that one is obligated to rend his garments for his teacher's death, just as he rends his garment for his father? As it states in the verse, he was calling out, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen. And then he no longer saw him. And he took his hold of his garments and tore them into two halves. This teaches he wants to rip apart from the collar. And so what we usually do is the lapel, and from up here, tearing from here, that's the collar, and downwards. What is the source that teaches one is obligated to rend his garments for the death of a Nazi, the head of the Jewish people, and the Av Basin, the head of the Jewish court, and a report of the majority of the community had been slain? It says in the verse, David took hold of his garments and rent them, as did all the people who were with him. They mounted and cried, and they fasted until the evening for Saul, the Nasi, and for his son Jonathan, the Abbasin, and for the people of God and the house of Israel, who had fell by the sword. This is an unfavorable report. Right, so from there we learn in those three instances. Hmm. Not, sounds like all three came together as one. How do we know separately that each one is powerful on its own? Not clear on that. Okay. The witnesses are not obligated to rend their garments when they testify in court, for they already tore them when they heard the blasphemy. Right? Witnesses who are now testifying that someone blasphemed, uh, you know, um, so they don't need to do it a second time telling over the story because they already did it when they saw the person blasphemy. What is the source that teaches us that one is obligated to rend his garments for a Torah scroll that was burned? So verse states, and it came to pass when Yehudi would read 3 or 4 columns until the entire scroll was consumed by the fire in the hearth, and neither the king nor his servants became fearful, nor did they rend their garments. Implied as one is obligated to rend their one's garments. In other words, this is an evil king, and he didn't rend his garments, which he should have. Right? He wasn't fearful, didn't have the fear of God, so he didn't rend his garments. One is obligated to rend one's garments only because of the Torah scroll that was burned arrogantly as in the incident cited, right? That's what happened over there. So then you have to rend because it was done in an arrogant way. One's obligated to rend one's garments twice, once for the parchment and once for the writing. And the king burnt the scrolls and the words. So two things happen, the scroll and the words. It's interesting. Lacha 10. What is the source that teaches that one is obligated to rend his garments when seeing the cities of Judah, Jerusalem, and the temple in their destruction? It says men came from Shechem, from Shiloh, and from Samaria, 80 men, with their beards shaven and their garments rent. Not clear what it means. Um, okay, well, their garments were rent, right? But that's when you're seeing it in its destruction. Hold on, I'm curious. Okay. I, today when you go to Jerusalem to the Wailing Wall, a Wailing Wall, so, right. I think there's some opinions say that you rent your garments, even though that's not the basic halacha, because you're not seeing it in its destruction today, even though what's remaining is remnants of from the destruction. But yet, then I think there's an opinion says you do rent your garments today, but I don't see people doing that. I don't think that that's the because it's not you're not seeing destruction. Halach number 11, when the story of Akiva, when he went on, 50 years after the destruction, and he went with four others and they were close to Temple Mount, they rent their garments because they saw the destruction. Whoever is present with a dying person at the time his soul expires is obligated to rent his garments, even if he is not his relative. Not certain about that halacha today either, if that's the case. Similarly, when a virtuous person dies, everyone's obligated to rend his garments because of him, even though he is not a sage. They tear them a hand's breadth, as other mourners do, right? A hand's breadth, it's like this size here, 3, 4 inches. So if you're there, when a person, a sage dies, when a sage dies, everyone is considered as his relative. They rend their garments for him until they reveal their hearts and uncover their right arms. Only if the parent is against the heart, everybody else is on the right side. The house of study of the sage should be discontinued for all 7 days of mourning. Torah scholars, eh, Yeah. Yeah, Torah scholars have universally accepted the custom of rendering their garments for a handbreadth in respect for each other, even though they are equal in stature and neither of them teaches the other. Whenever, whenever a person rends his garment because of the sages who dies, as soon as he turns away from the bear, he may sow irregularly. It appears to me that when the person rends his garment for a sage, he may mend them on the following day. For even when a teacher dies, one should mourn for him only one day, either the day of his death or the day he hears the report of his death. Similarly, it appears to me that a person who rends his garment because of the death of a Nasi or the like may sew them irregularly on the following day, even though he may never mend them, because that's a Nasi. But you can sew them irregularly the following. When a report comes that a sage has died, we rend our garments only at the time he is eulogized. This is the honor granted to him. One may sew the garment that day and mend it the following day. When an Av Basin dies, everyone rends his garment because of him and uncovers his left arm. All the houses of study in the city are discontinued, meaning for the week. Those who some members of the synagogue enter the synagogue and change their places. Those who sit at the south should sit in the north. Those sit in the north sit in the south. Part of, not being in your comfort zone. Expressing it in this way when the head of the Jewish court the Sanhedrin passes away. When a Nasi dies, everyone rends his garment because of him and it covers both arms. All of the house of studies discontinue. The members of the synagogue enter the synagogue on Shabbos, call some into the Torah reading, and depart. They should not stroll in the marketplace, but instead should sit together in families mourning the entire day. All right. Excellent. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All the best.